Hi everybody and welcome to a new episode of Dublin Tech Talks. I'm here with Susan Bowman, who is MD of ERSL. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks for having me.
So ERSL, Enterprise Registry Solutions, an Irish business that was acquired by a Canadian business, ISC, about 5 years ago. Susan, you're on board 8 months? 7 months?
No, 7 months.
7
Easy
months.
Now. Don't overcommit me.
As Irish MD, great to have you. Great to be on the show. Do you want to give a bit of a background about yourself and a bit about Enterprise Registry Solutions?
Yeah, so, my career started, my first proper job, started in California, actually. So I'm technically an economist by trade, which is kind of hilarious. But yeah, my first gig was in California, I was working with the genomics startup out in San Francisco. So that was genomics. So they had mapped the human genome, and the idea was you could log in online as a researcher and take down that little part of the data and then work on it. But that was before there was 5G or amazing broadband. So yeah, my whole baptism of fire was, California, working in a startup. It had been funded or sort of grown out of a Stanford group of guys. It was incredible. It was such an amazing start to my career. And I learned a lot there. And then they went bust, which is a whole story in itself. I got fired while I had a broken foot. So I sort of hobbled out of the office. And American style of being fired, 15 minutes. Yeah, you can't go back to your desk, And they closed the door 6 weeks later. So, the company went under. And there was so much. I remember when the data center went up for sale on the website, it said, this is the best data center we've ever seen. So there's so much I took from that about, they were preparing for incredible growth, big business, and they just couldn't manage their costs. And there were other exogenous factors like, broadband and internet access that were issues that meant they were just too early to the market. But anyway, so that was my first job. And then I worked for Wells Fargo, which was completely the other way, massive organization. They launched the first internet banking website. And that's where I started working. Incredible experience there. Then I came back, and really a large part of my career was Dell Computers here in Dublin. Originally they were in Bray, and then they moved to Cherrywood. So my story, lots of people say, oh, did you start in Bray? I was like, no, I was never in Bray. So we started.
I didn't know they were in Bray.
They had a big outfit down in Bray, and I think that they would have talked about those days as the heydays. And then they moved to Cherrywood. It's a huge site. There was 1,800 at its height. Amazing place. Spent over a decade there. Learned so much there. Great guys. And I think after I left, I never really appreciated the culture actually as much until I left. I just thought everywhere was like that. I thought everywhere was great, and everybody really cared about your career, and I just assumed that was the norm. And then I decided to go out on my own. I was traveling too much. I had 2 young babies. It was murdering me. I was flying all over the world. And then I went out on my own and thought that really I was just going to find I wanted to also get into other industries. I think that was a big thing, was in big tech organizations, you can find people that are there decades. And I felt, okay, look, I got to go out and see, can I do something on my own? Am I really responsible for a thing on my own? I think, when you ask about how the hell did you get into an MD role, that was where it started to merge of like, I just want to feel like it's mine and it's something that I've grown and that I'm autonomous in it. So anyway, I went out on my own, worked in a few places, worked for Novartis, did some work with an airline aviation company here in town. There was someone else in there, I can't remember, which is probably terrible.
It was a job interview you began.
Yeah, I tell you, there's a hole in my CV. There isn't. I just couldn't remember them. But that was brilliant. That really was can I deliver? Can I show value? can I bring, and I always do this, I ask this in interviews around, what's in your toolkit? Like, what do you bring every time to your job? So I really developed my toolkit there. I'd learned so much in Dell and I didn't know it actually. And then I really started to hone that into a toolkit of, well, how do I use this? What would I apply? How do I build operations and so on? And then, I did a few years at Lease Plan, a big company based out of Amsterdam. That was a huge sort of revamp of their IT services, but then into a digital transformation. And then I left there to come here. So I joined ERS 7 months ago. And really that story is a company, ERS was created 20 years ago. Still has a feeling of a startup in some ways. It's sort of small and the team have been there together a long time. So I came in to take over running that company. They were started 20 years ago. Their whole focus is registry operations, which I didn't even really know what that meant. They're like, well, it's a registry. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? So the way I sort of describe a registry is a government operated list, which they're going to kill me now when I have just completely dumbed down our entire business into a list. But it's really a controlled list of people that are either companies or assets or a land registry. So everything, your driver's license registry, pharmacies are registered, pharmacists are registered, land, all these sort of controlled lists of who's on the list, who has the asset, who's registered. So one of our biggest clients would be the Company Registration Office. I think that's always our number one customer reference. So when you log in, you register your company. When you register the directors, you do your annual return, all those sort of things. That's on our software. So they've built a great product over those 2 decades. They've diversified into aviation and other registries. And I think the theme that's come on with e-government has really created this new wave of development that we're really hoping to capitalise on.
Brilliant.
I know. That was a short intro, right?
Short. It was short and sweet.
This is your longest podcast on record.
So what strikes me there is, change is obviously, coming from a big org like a Dell into a local Lease Plan at that time. It wasn't, a pretty much autonomy in Ireland for what you were doing and coming in with a change platform. From there, and then obviously your current role is sort of a change platform and also a growth platform. What would you see as your kind of commonalities between your kind of transformation or change programs that you kind of look at and go, if we could do something here different, or what way do you try and go about it?
Yeah, it's really funny because I hadn't really noticed that on my CV. When I look back, like it's tiny and then big company and then tiny and then big company. And it looks like it's all over the place, but actually there's so much you can learn on either. So on the small startup, there is no HR department, or who's going to fill out my travel and expenses? Well, it's you. You're doing everything. Yeah, totally. So I love that. And also it's really strong culture. It's really easy to create a culture when you're all sitting in one room, when you're all there together, when you're growing something and you all feel really part of it. So then you flip over to something like Wells Fargo, which is like hundreds of thousands of people, and how they then scale that down, like trickle all the way down from the CEO. Same in Novartis, how they trickle that culture and approach and style into multiple locations. So it's actually not by design, I might add, but it's been this incredible learning of how do you go from small to big, and then how do you go big all the way down to small. So how do you make sure the employee in a 30-person company feels just as valuable as the 110. And what's weird about Dell is they actually had done a great job about making you all feel part of a family when you were 100,000 people, which is mad.
But Michael Dell was still the CEO
he was,
at that
and
time.
he wasn't.
Oh,
he was. So he was, and then he sold it. No, he didn't sell it. He stepped back and he handed over. And then he decided that wasn't actually going the way he liked it. So then he came back. And he actually went even further to buy it back off the market. Yeah. So it was publicly traded. And then, interestingly, I'm not speaking directly for Michael now, but the sentiment was that the level of change he needed to bring into the company he couldn't do when the shareholders and the stock market were watching every single step.
Yeah.
So his approach was, well, I'm going to take it off the market, change it, and then put it back on.
Yeah.
Incredible approach. But yeah, I think that's been a big thing for me of when I talk about that toolkit of the things that I bring with me is how do you go from small to big? So how do you scale? But also then how do you keep those important things trickling down all the way through a company? And I think, going small, big, big, small has really helped hone, okay, well, there's a couple of things you need to do. I do think, and it's funny now in this role, this company have been together 20 years. These guys, lots of them have worked together for a really long time. They all know each other. And the culture was really led by those founders. They set the tone and their approach, the things they said. It's funny because in my first couple of weeks starting, I came across Satya Nadella's book. He took over Microsoft. So I thought, this is great. Like, this is a handbook now. This guy's going to have written, this is how you take over from Bill Gates. I thought, I'm going to take a day off, just read this book. This guy's going to tell me, how do you come in as a newbie and harness all the good stuff? Like, this company, ERS, has been around 20 years. Like, clearly they're doing something amazing. So how do I harness all that? But I'm different, and where we need to go is now a completely different direction. So not necessarily what we deliver, but how we're owned and how we operate. So I thought, great, this book's going to, page 1, page 2, page 3, equals, here's the checklist. It isn't, just so you know. It's a lot about, the first part is really about empathy and how to relate to people. And then he goes off on this mad tangent about AI and how it's taking over the world and we should all be very scared. So that was a bit of a slam dunk there. Couldn't get that over the line at all.
You had your notebook ready.
Yes, and then I was like, oh, God, I'm going to have to figure this out myself. But I do think, and I know you guys have talked about this in your other podcasts, there is a thing about harnessing that culture. So what is important to us as a group? Who are we? When you come down to it, do we look after each other? How do we look after our customers? What's important? So I think there's always a bit of that work to do. That's always important, is that reset. And actually, it was the only... when I did my first town hall, it was the only thing I took from Satya's book was that he created this sort of image of like when you go on a web page, and it's not working really, and you just click the refresh button. Yeah. That's pretty much all I took from the book. Was that's what you're trying to do. Is you're coming in as a new MD, you've got to click that refresh button, and he says in it, you have to. There's nothing wrong with the page. It's just you need to refresh it a bit. So there's loads of good stuff that's still working on the page, but we have to go again. Yeah. And that's really the start now for me is how do we bring all that good stuff together? How do we click refresh? How does everyone feel that it's still the same company, that all the good stuff that they've done is still right and worthwhile? But how do we now move on? And then, so there's that first step is that refresh. Okay. Who are we? What do we do? Do we all know what we want to be? And then, okay, well, how are we going to get there? Yeah. So that was the first couple of months. They're still looking at me going like, is she crazy? Like, have we made the right decision? And I have a great board, our parent company in Canada, and they are great. And they're very, culturally, we're very similar. They're very easygoing, very open, really helpful. So they've been amazing. So you can go and ask stupid questions along with big, heavy, meaty questions. So that's been really helpful. But then, the second phase is that toolkit, is that what are the things that we need to do to scale? And how do we go through that change? And I think what I've noticed always... the same thing happened in Lease Plan. There were some meetings where I'd be looking at the guys and they're looking at me going, she's nuts. Like, she's totally lost it. Like, she wants to do all these things and all at the same time. And I do think, I was thinking about it really coming over here. I'm so used to that change, even in my own career of changing jobs or I was trying to use that analogy with the team. I used to race boats back before I had kids, and I'd no life. But back when I did have a life, I used to race, and you used to change tack all the time. So you'd be in a race, and you have to go around 5 marks, and you got to go somewhere, and sometimes that could take a week, and sometimes it takes 2 days or 4 hours. But it's totally normal to change tack. It's totally normal to go, yeah, this isn't working out, so we now need to go left instead. And you do that all the time. And I think when I look at some of those faces, they're like, she wants to do all these changes. And I think I've had to learn over time that not everyone operates on that same level. I'm like, we're changing direction. We're going over here. And I think I've had to temper myself and really in this role trying to slow that down. What happened in Lease Plan was we came up with a plan. We all did it together. I thought that was really important. We worked out what are the things that we don't want to change? What are the things that are great? What are the things that work? And what are the things that we want to change? And then we put that plan together. And then what happened, and I do believe it's important, you need those quick wins.
Yeah.
So that, is she crazy test, of in the first quarter they go, oh, that actually worked. Yeah. Or we could put in that process and it stuck and it's made our lives really easy. And I think that's important because people go, okay, this isn't madness. This actually is going to get us somewhere.
That's just natural human nature though, isn't it? You need to see something, especially at board level or at exec level, you have to really say, okay, whoever's the boss's boss always has to see there is an improvement or there is something happening from
just
this.
like, what's this? Like, are you just moving all the furniture around for no bloody reason? Like, or is this actually going to bring us closer to where we want to go? And I think that refresh bit of that first step of, well, where do we want to go?
Yeah.
Like, is that still the right way? And then how do we want to do that? And there's always a lot of, what's gone wrong before and why has it gone wrong? Not just because everybody's got reasons as to why we shouldn't do it. And you have to listen to them. And there is nuggets in there, really gold stuff where you're like, it's either cultural in the company or particular leaders that it didn't work or whatever the reason is. You got to really understand why it didn't work and then decide to do it a different way or not do it that way at all.
Yeah.
But I do think, so refresh first was the way. Then the second one is build a plan together. And then you got to, as a leader, be able to get over those faces of what is she doing and show the quick wins. And then when people start to see that value, you can really see them start to ignite. And that's what you're in the whole gig for is when everyone starts to look back and goes, this is working. Life is easier.
Yeah.
What we're delivering is easier, and we've got repeatable processes, and we've got operations that make sense. And then you form as a team as well. Everyone starts to pull together a bit. I found now, I'm hoping I could do it a second time, but it definitely, as the team solidifies, then it starts to get into another gear.
Yeah.
So it's not you saying, this is what I think we should do, or this is where we need to go. Your own team are coming back and going, I have an idea, or what do you think of this? I'm like, oh my God, thank God.
Yeah.
It's not me pushing it all the time. You don't want to be that leader of, I've come up with another idea, and they're like, would you ever leave us alone?
Yeah.
It's when the team starts to pull together and then they're starting to think on their own and thinking ideas and collaborating together, and then you're onto something.
I think that's the kind of shift within leadership of the last kind of 5 years even, where it was a lot top down. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Thanks very much. Give me your report in 6 months and tell me how you got on. Now it's that collective thought process, bringing people on the journey, getting them to buy into that journey.
Yeah.
And modern leadership has kind of evolved like that, and people want to be treated with respect in adults, and they don't want to be treated as us and them. And it sounds very easy, but it's not how we have done work for many years. And a lot of organizations still have that hierarchical demand and leads, and you manage down and not manage up. So
I think it is really hard. Like, it's definitely a change. There's definitely been even the sense of we work together not you work for me. I think that is definitely, even in my career, that has evolved. I had some bosses in my early career that were, speak when you're spoken to, you know, and that was very much a culture of we are going this way and everyone shut up, get on board, don't ask any questions and hurry up. And I definitely noticed that guard changing, where it became much more collaborative. And you get more. I mean, it's the essence of design thinking is you really design for the widest group of users, and you'll always find those corner cases, and then you're onto something. So yeah, I think that sort of top-down leadership can get really blinkered, and you're missing it. And it's slightly egotistical. You're like, I know exactly what you're supposed to do. I'm only in here a wet day.
I've done this before.
And I know everything. And it's madness. Yeah. So I do think that's changed. I also think, though, what sometimes there's hard decisions to make. And I think, funny, I was doing calibration yesterday where you compare everyone at the end of the year and what's their strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's a trait that's hard, that you've got to learn and got to be okay with, is those hard decisions. And, I've had my fair share of having to let people go, put people on pips. I remember I had a boss in Dell. He'll never listen to this, but
Harsh.
I had a boss in Dell, and he said to me, he goes, you got to fire the whole team in a particular site that I had, not in Ireland. And I was like, I can't. What are you talking about? There's no way I can fire them all. And he goes, would you pick them? So if we were building a team again, would you pick them, all of them? I was like, well, no. And he goes, well, then what are you doing? What are you doing? You're going to carry them all year and for 2 years and 3 years. And, you haven't got the right team. And it really sat with me now. I didn't fire them all on the same day.
I think that really stands to me, the amount of startups I work with, that they're not afraid to make that decision quickly. Yeah. The person in that position for 12 months or 18 months was perfect for that 18 months.
Yeah.
But the next stage of the business, that right person, okay, they shake hands, everybody says it, and then they get the next person in. And startups do that extremely well.
Yeah, and you have to, because even in your first phase, they might have been the right people. But then when you go on to the next phase, and it doesn't mean they need to go, it means that we need to find a different place for them, and you got to get comfortable with that. I remember I sit on the board for TUSLA, the Child Protection Agency, and Bernard Gloucester, who's now the new CEO for the HSE, starting now in a few weeks. Watching him was phenomenal. He was such an inspiration for me, not just as a board member to watch how he runs the executive team, but just how he managed us as a board, and then how he managed down and how he created that team. He's just such an example of, and he's going to be phenomenal in the HSE. But it's such an example of, you got to make some tough decisions, and they're really, really hard to do. But you need good back. And the one thing I would say, and we've talked about it, is you need a backing of your board. And actually, I felt that all my career, when you've got bad, and it's not worked out sometimes for me, where you've got to make tough decisions. And I've gone back to my boss or my board and said, you need to back me up here. This is going to be tough now. And we need to be all on the same page as we go through this. And sometimes they are, and it works, and sometimes they aren't, and that's where it goes awry. And you need, for it to be set up for success, you need people behind you going, I've got your back. When we drive through this, it is the right decision, we all agree, and you need to make hard decisions.
I think that question of, would you hire the same person again, is a really difficult question, because
it's really tough.
It is right timing, as I call it, when you, and it's.
I've heard you say that to me.
Yeah. And that is, in essence, what you're like. You need that person then, but if you want to have high performing teams, is that person a part of my high performing team future? And the more you read about it and do that, you do have to make that, and it's never nice. I've fired people, I've had to let people go, I've done all that, and it's just, you feel crap about it. But fundamentally, if you have to deliver X, that person mightn't be on the same journey. Yeah,
and it's different times as well. I mean, you can be at different stages of your life. I mean, for me with Dell, the sky was the limit. I loved it. honestly an amazing place to work, and the guys were amazing, the gals were amazing. It was amazing, but I had 2 babies, and I'd be on a red eye home calculating the number of hours that my childminder had spent, and would I spend more time with my child if I got home at 5 a.m. You know, mad stuff. So at that time, I had to go. I needed for myself. I wanted to spend more time with my kids. I couldn't be flying. I was flying every 2 weeks, and I just couldn't do it for myself. And you do go. That's what I'm saying. I've heard you say that too about timing. Is it's just not the right time. You know, that it can be whatever the company needs to go through. That we need different skill sets, and it doesn't mean. And I always try and split these. There's skills and experience. We might have loads of people that have great experience, but we need a different mix of skills that are going to bring us on, and we need to make moves on it. But I do that change. I think it's something I always have to remember is it's hard. Everyone finds change difficult, and going through so much change of people and strategy and approach and ways of working. It can be a lot for people to absorb. Yeah, no, definitely. Especially at the moment with layoffs here and layoffs there. There's a lot of uncertainty in certain people's minds going, are we next? And, you know, a move away from kind of, we talked about it before about that definite certainty I'll have a job because I work in tech. To now going, oh shit, actually, I might be next, my business. Yeah, but sometimes those things can really, like, you know, for myself, I've always pushed. I remember there are certain people that I looked at that were never going to leave the company. In some of those bigger organizations, they were lifers, and that scared the hell out of me. And I am a big believer in, you know, Daniel Pink's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I knew for me those 3 traits were something that I needed. I needed that sense of autonomy, and I wanted to master the skill. I wanted to figure out, you know, I wanted to be the best at that thing, running operations, running massive digital transformations, running a company. And I think it is a trap. You can, you know, we have some incredible tech companies here, and there is incredible talent in there, and you can get cushy for sure. You can sit there and go, it's this kind of nice, and the free lunch is brilliant, and that gym downstairs. And they tell me they love me all the time. I get free t-shirts. I get a name. And I do. It can become part of your identity. And I say that because I saw that happen. I saw that happen where people became lifers and they were never going to leave. And you can get really cushy there. And then are you really, really fulfilling your own best self for achieving what you really want? And I think it's very difficult to move, though. Like my world is trying to get people to move, but it's very difficult. Like myself, I was 13 years in the company, and it was cushy. It was, you know, but when you do make that change, it is, you know, it's great, but it is also very scary. It is scary, but that's what I like. I think if you become a person that has your toolkit, you bring your tools with you, your tool belt, or all the things that you know work, and then you go again. And it's not forever, you know. Like it can be, you know, you could do your 3 years or your 5 years, and then you decide, you know what, this is a great place and I want to stay here for 10 years or 15, depending. And again, if you're 20, you know, it's okay to do your 2 years, but when you're 65, you might go. I think it's once the organisation that lets you evolve. I think that's really important. Exactly. Wanted to talk around female leadership. Networks, all that kind of stuff. You know, you've come up through big companies, you know, probably, I don't know, empowering women leadership, trying to, you know, do you feel there's a lack of that within Ireland? Do you know, what's your thoughts on that? No, it's really, so I don't. I think there is a lot going on for sure. I think some of the big companies are doing a lot around STEM. Tech companies are doing a lot around STEM, which is great. And I think that'll be a massive shift. Girls staying in school to do chemistry and science and technological subjects, I think it's going to be massive. That's the future for sure. I think there's a middle space that I am part of where we weren't emboldened that way. there were a lot of people I went to school with or went to college with that were not feeling so positive or confident about, oh yeah, I'm going into tech and that's great. Most of my meetings, most of my career, I've been in, low 10% female presence in the meeting. But I grew up with two brothers and, that was totally fine with me. But I think the boards thing's going to be interesting. I think even in the leadership, I know you've shared those stats before around, I think women often feel comfortable as number twos. I did for a long time. I thought I'll never take a number one job. The whole idea of it frightens the hell out of me. And then the more I've come on, I've been like, you know what, I'm happy in that leadership role. So I think naturally our generation, I think women have been conditioned to maybe not go for number one. I think the generations coming up behind, I think that'll change. The big focus is going to be around boards, I think, for us. And I know, I was going to these award ceremonies and watching some of these women. I was like, how the hell did they get there? Like, what's the magic sauce? And I went up to one of them and I said, can you meet me for a coffee and tell me how did you all get there?
Yeah.
I remember there were a whole bunch of women, it was in the Shelburne, and one of the women got up and said, we represent 20 or 30 board positions just at our table. I was like, what is going on at that table? Yeah. What do they know that we all don't know? And I met with one of them for coffee and I said, tell me, what do I need to do? This is something I'm interested in. I love strategy. I love watching a company grow, both inside and outside. Obviously, I have a day job. And she said to me, go on a course. She said, I never tell people go on a course, go do a course and that'll make you better. She said, I wouldn't normally say it, but go and do the Institute of Directors course. And I would definitely, Eileen Gleeson runs the Chartered Director course. She's phenomenal in herself. I've met her many a time for a mentoring session to help me make decisions about how I go on boards and what do I say and how do I present myself and what's your role. And she's amazing in herself. The course is also amazing. But that was a real...
less than 1% are certified at board level.
Well, this is why. But also, because originally I had another mentor and I was chairing a very small charity board. And I'd go meet him for coffee and I was like, talk to me. What's the gig? And he's like, here's the handbook. You read this. And it was a total baptism of fire. And he was brilliant because he sat on a number of significant boards here in Dublin. Philip Flynn, an incredible mentor to me over my career. And he was the one that started me on the journey of explaining it. Then I went to this event. They're all on boards. I'm like, well, what the hell's going on? Where do you apply for those jobs?
Yeah.
And then I did the course. And what is brilliant about the course, and I would recommend it to any director that has, their right level of experience. What are the rules? How do you read financial reports? How do you really evaluate a strategy? Can you read an annual report from any company? Don't read the what was the one I was looking at the other day? Honestly, it was like the telephone book, Kerry Group. Absolutely ginormous.
We had Anthony Quigley on the podcast from Corporate Governance Institute, and he precisely said the same thing. Nobody knows what to do on them.
Yeah, and that's why the course is so brilliant. It's so good to go, this is a financial acumen. This is how you approach strategy. This is how, and knowing your position as well. I think that takes time on a board. Is how do you know, you're not running the business, but you're helping them achieve the business. And I think that's been a big part of learning how to as a female, feeling confident, going, yep, got my badge, got my cert, and then going for those positions. And I do think we'll see it. We'll see it now in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm seeing it even on the board that I'm on. You're seeing more women come in. So I do think hopefully we'll be the last generation that will be hesitant to take those leadership roles.
I definitely think you're right.
Hopefully.
Susan Bowman, MD of ERSL, thank you very much for your time with Dublin Tech Talks today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Susan Bowman, MD of ERSL here in Dublin. She has a really interesting story of kind of how she's evolved her leadership and how she's found her leadership voice and what she does well. The digital transformation journey, or even an organizational transfer journey, is really compelling, and making sure that you have the right leadership skills, that you bring people on the journey, and that you listen and try and get that group together and make sure people are singing off the same hymn sheet and kind of pushing forward. I find leadership really interesting and really compelling, something I'm very interested in. So it was a very interesting talk for myself. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and or our Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Talk to you soon. Thanks.